Okay, we're live.
Somebody needs to turn on their TV set in the background.
Let me just, everyone can mute themselves, please. Bruce, you're not muted. Okay, good evening. My name is Mally Rosado, and I'm the council president for the city of Hartford. I would like to call the first meeting of the Hartford Charter Revision Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded by Hartford Public Access TV. It's live on Facebook and also on Comcast Channel 96. As president of the Court of Common Council, it is my honor to preside over this opening meeting. The first order of business is the roll call. In my capacity as the temporary chair, I am appointing David Grant to the temporary chair position, secretary position, in order to make the attendance so that we can move forward with the meeting. With that said, Mr. Grant, could you please call the roll?
Yes, when I say your name, just please say here. Alexander Aponte.
Here.
Arunan Arulapam.
Here.
Steve Bonafonte.
Here.
Raul de Jesus.
Here.
John Gale.
Here.
Vicky Gallen Clark.
Here.
Kamora Harrington.
Here.
Kenneth Kennedy.
Here.
Kathleen Kowalshin.
Here.
Melvin Medina.
Here.
Yadira Rivera.
Here.
Bruce Rubenstein. Bruce. Did we lose Bruce?
Bruce, you're on mute. You have to unmute, Bruce.
Okay. Eon Smith.
Here.
James Wolfe.
Here. Here.
Okay. Everyone is present and accounted for.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum. Before I talk about the process, perhaps we could go around the room and give everyone 1 minute so that you can introduce yourself to your colleagues and the public that's viewing us this evening. And we could go in the order. David, if you could just call their names in the same order you did. Thank you.
Yes. Alexander.
Hi, I'm an attorney here in the city of Hartford. I served on a common council and I was also corporation counsel for the city of Hartford.
Arunan.
Yeah, I'm Arunan Naralampalam. I work for the Department of Consumer Protection, live in the south end of Hartford, and I'm excited to be here with all of you and to hear from each of you.
Steve.
Hi, Steve Bonafonte. I'm an attorney here also. I live in Hartford. I was born in Hartford, grew up in New Britain, moved back to Hartford in 1998, served on a variety of boards and commissions over the past 20 years.
Raul.
How you doing? My name is Raul de Jesus Jr., former city councilman, lifelong resident, and very excited to be on this board.
John.
Yeah, hello everyone. John Gale. I'm an attorney in a private practice here in Hartford, and am now serving in my 6th term on the Hartford City Council, and excited to work with all of you.
Vicky.
Vicky Gallen Clark. I'm the executive director of the Blue Hills Civic Association, also known as Building Hartford Through Community Action. Great to be here to represent the voice of the people.
Thank you. Kamora.
Kamora, on and on again, lifelong resident of the city of Hartford and founder of Kamora's Cultural Corner.
Kenneth.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Kennedy. I'm an attorney for the state of Connecticut. I'm assistant attorney general. I've done that for almost 30 years. Former Hartford City Council member. Currently serve as chairman of the SynCap Credit Union, and looking to get to know all of you as we get into this process.
Kathleen.
I'm Kate Kowalshin. I live in the southwest end of Hartford, and I'm an attorney also.
Melvin.
Hey folks, Mel. I'm a community organizer, largely doing work around criminal justice and policing. Work for the ACLU, a Hartford resident on Charter Oak Ave, and really excited to be here.
Yadira?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jalita Rivera. I am born and raised in the North End of Hartford, and I also do community organizing in the city.
Bruce?
My name is Bruce Rubenstein. There's enough lawyers here to start a law firm. I'm a lawyer. I'm a lifelong resident, community activist, very concerned about issues involving regular, ordinary people, people of color, working people, and particularly the citizens of Hartford. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ian Smith. Just recently moved to Hartford, wonderful community. I want to first of all say thank you to the treasurer for nominating me and for the president for appointing me to this very important position. I look forward to working with you and doing some good for the people of Hartford.
James?
Everyone, my name is James Wolfe. I'm a lawyer as well and the director of government affairs at a firm called the Connecticut Group, and I live in Frog Hollow, and looking forward to working with you all as we get started here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say how impressed I am about the backgrounds, experience, and diversity of this commission. I am grateful that all of you are serving in this important endeavor. We also have with us Attorney Steve Mednick, who will discuss the rules of the road in a couple of minutes. Without further ado, I will entertain nominations for the position of chair.
I nominate James Wolfe.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any other nominations?
I nominate Bruce Rubenstein.
Second.
Are there any other nominations?
Madam Chairperson,
Yes,
I move that nominations be closed.
thank you. Is there a second on that motion for nomination?
Second.
Motion that nominations be closed has been made. With that said, we now have two nominations for chair, that being James Wolfe and Mr. Bruce Rubenstein. David, if you could call the rolls on the votes, and Steve, Mr. Mednick, Attorney Mednick, should we take the votes in the order that we did the roll call, and
I think you
can
should,
say who they're supporting?
I think you should go down the list and they can indicate who they support for a chair.
Wonderful. David, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alexander?
Wolfe.
Arunan?
James Wolfe.
Steve? Steve?
James Wolfe.
Raul?
James Wolfe.
You said James Wolfe, correct?
That's right.
John?
James Wolfe.
Vicky?
Bruce Rubenstein.
Kamora?
Bruce Rubenstein.
Kenneth? Kenneth?
He's trying to unmute himself.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. There's that background noise. Rubenstein.
Kathleen?
James Wolfe.
Melvin?
Bruce Rubenstein.
Yadira?
James Wolfe.
Bruce? Bruce?
Bruce Rubenstein.
Eon,
Bruce Rubenstein.
and James.
James Wolfe.
With a final vote of 8 for James and 6 for Bruce, James has it.
Thank you. Congratulations to Mr. Wolfe as Chair of the Charter Commission. We also want to thank Bruce Rubenstein.
Madam Chairperson,
Yes,
move that the vote be unanimous. I'd like to start off with some unanimity on this commission.
thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and properly second for this to move unanimously. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any abstentions? Any nays? The ayes have it. Congratulations, Mr. Wolfe.
Very much, Council President.
So I believe that I can now, Mr. Mednick, correct me if I'm wrong, I can take this meeting and hand it over to our chair, Mr. Wolfe, and I will be leaving you all to conduct business, and I'll be watching through Hartford Public Access. Again, I want to thank you all and congratulations to all. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Council President Rosado.
Bye, Molly.
All right, and thank you to my fellow commissioners for your support. It's an honor to have the opportunity to serve our city as the chair of this commission, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you as we consider changes and improvements to our charter. I've spoken to a lot of you, and there's been a lot of interesting ideas floated about changes that we could make to the charter, and I'm looking forward to exploring those with you in a manner that's open, that fosters healthy debate and dialogue, and produces a work product that we can all be proud of. And one thing that I hope we can keep in mind as we go through this process is that this charter that we've been tasked with exploring belongs to the citizens of the city of Hartford. Our work will start at our next meeting, which will be a public hearing where we'll hear directly from those citizens. And this process will end with those same citizens voting to approve or reject the recommendations that we make. So I hope we can work together and not lose sight of who we're serving on this commission and who will be the ultimate judge of our work. And with that, let's turn back to the agenda. Keep moving. I'll entertain a motion to open nominations for vice chair. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move to nominate Raul de Jesus for vice chair.
Second.
Any other nominations? I'll entertain a motion to close nominations.
Motion to close.
Second.
The motion's been properly made and seconded. Seeing that Raul is the only individual nominated for the position, congratulations, Raul, on your election to vice chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
I will now entertain a motion to open nominations for secretary, and I want to be clear, and David and Attorney Mednick.
Yes, sir.
Council Commissioner
John,
Gale?
you are muted. You're muted, John.
Okay, point of order, James. I don't want to get unduly officious about things, but I do think if a motion's made and seconded, you probably should call for some sort of vote before moving on to the next thing. I think you rather assumed that the vote was unanimous in closing the nominations. Unless I'm wrong, Mr. Mednick, and a motion to close the nominations doesn't need a vote. Seemed to me we should just be taking a vote when motions are made.
Or you could take, what he could do is with permission of the body, cast one vote for the, a unanimous vote for the sole nominee would be another approach, Councilman.
Either or works for me. I just
All right.
think we ought to stick by the rules.
Okay.
So we will cast a single vote for Raul De Jesus as vice chair.
Do we need someone to make a motion for voice? No.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? The ayes have it. Okay. On to the position of secretary. And I just wanted to check in with David and Attorney Mednick. For the position of secretary, the secretary won't actually be taking minutes. We will have, that'll be David and Steve will be working to take minutes. So the position of secretary will be an emergency note taker if need be. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. I think David will make arrangements, make sure that we have minutes for the meeting. I'll be happy to help him out in that regard.
Great. Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to open nominations for the position of secretary. Do we have any volunteers?
This one sounds like work.
I'll be happy to volunteer.
Great. Do we want to have someone put Commissioner Gale's name in? Or
I'll be happy to nominate Councilman Gale.
Okay, we have a nomination. Commissioner Aponte, was that a second?
Yes.
Okay. Any other nominations? Do we have a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, seeing as Councilman Gale is the only nominee, can we have a vote to approve Councilman Gale as the secretary for the Charter Revision Commission? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Congratulations, Councilman Gale. And now we can move on to item number 5 on the agenda, and I will pass this over to Attorney Mednick, who is going to give us an overview of the role of the commission, the charge of the resolution, and the law of the home rule and timeline. Attorney Mednick, take it away.
Thank you, sir. David, can you, I'd like to put a PowerPoint on the screen. Can you share it with me?
Which PowerPoint?
I have a PowerPoint here that I'd like to put on the screen, if that's possible. Can you share the screen?
Sure. There you go.
Where am I looking here? Share screen. Okay. Got it. All right. Is it up on the screen? Anybody see it?
Yep.
All right, good. I'm glad. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chairman. My pleasure. Look forward to spending a lot of time with you in the next year or so as we go through this process. I look forward to meeting the members I don't know. I'm very pleased to see, I think Alexander Aponte signed my first contract to do charter revisions back in the early part of this century. So I've known him for many, many years, and Ken Kennedy and Bruce Rubenstein, and of course, Mel Medina. Mel Medina was a star of one of my charter revision meetings about 2 weeks ago when we were discussing police issues, police commission, and civilian review in Hamden. So I'm very pleased to see all of you. And I've, of course, met Councilman Gale and look forward to working with you and everybody on this commission. I am honored. This is my 4th charter revision in In Hartford, I'm a little daunted. I don't know whether I'm on the receiving end of a continuing legal education course or on the giving end of a continuing legal education course. I think all of us should probably see whether we can get any credits for this charter revision process, since there's so many of us involved in the process. What I'd like to say is that the charter process is really a remarkable opportunity to bring change to your town and to create flexible structures that allow for the greatest accountability and effectiveness for local governments in the 21st century. It's a mid-20th century invention in Connecticut, the notion of home rule, and the chair is absolutely correct. We are here doing the people's business. This is the most important document in the city of Hartford, with arguable exception about the annual budget and the tax bills that people get. This is a very critical document. But the purposes of home rule are pretty basic, and they're twofold. One is to relieve the General Assembly of the task of handling and enacting special legislation of local municipal concern. Up through the mid-century, the Hartford Charter, and as you go through this document, if you're not familiar with it, you will note that there's a number of acts that were adopted by the legislature as special acts. Those provisions are unique to Hartford. In many cases, for example, New Haven has special act zoning, which makes their zoning structure different than any other zoning structure in the state of Connecticut. Some towns have, 5 towns in the state of Connecticut have recall. The other 664 do not, because they got them under special acts. So the idea of home rule was to say, we don't want to have to create local governments. We want to give the governments the ability to govern themselves to a point. And as I go through this, I'll point out why I say it's not a complete commitment of responsibility. The second was to allow municipalities to draft and adopt and revise charters, which are the organic law of the municipality, which supersede pre-existing charters and inconsistent special acts. So you can overturn a special act by enacting a charter provision to replace it. And so, as you'll see, I'll be very careful while we're doing surgery in the next year. If there's a special act provision that is unique that you want to keep, we should be careful and not touch it. On the other hand, you'll find, we'll talk about this a little later, there's a whole section of the charter that's over 100 pages long that I've spent the last 2 or 3 months going through, of special act pension provisions that I'm going to be recommending that we repeal this year because none of them truly apply. So the goal of a charter revision must be to create a document or blueprint for the governance of your community. In many cases, charter change has been a piecemeal process, which allows for the placement of provisions side by side with earlier special act provisions, referenda provisions, and they remain in the charter in spite of local legal conflicts with intervening preemptive legislation, which sometimes cause enormous interpretive challenges for mayors, city councils, city attorneys, corporation councils, and the staff running the day-to-day business of the municipality. What's involved in some communities is a culture of disregard, where an arcane provision is simply ignored, or a culture of paralysis, where the provisions prevent otherwise reasonable behavior. The goal of the charter revisions that I work on throughout the state is to try to make sure we end up with a charter that allows the mayor and the council to govern, to adopt ordinances, to finance the government, and to set the policies in a context of accountability. So it really is a blueprint for governance. It allows the mayor and the council to operate in their capacities as the executive and legislative bodies of the community. So the first question for a commission is the scope. How far do you want to go in reforming the charter? And you usually begin this, begin to answer that question following your initial public hearing. The enabling legislation, the 2 resolutions that were adopted, were fairly broad. There was no specific issue that the council was mandating that you review, because this is the periodic 10-year review of the charter that was created in one of our earlier charter revisions. And so the statutory responsibilities to consider changes and other items and matters as deems necessary or desirable to improve the governance of the community, of the city, of the town. So the question of scope really depends on this commission and what you learn and how you plan on developing your scope. And the way the scope is defined, as the chair indicated, there are two public hearings. You start and end with a public hearing. The idea of the public hearing is to hear from the members of the community, to get a feel for what their priorities are. And very often you have to ask them to be focused on the document, on the charter itself, as opposed to a budgetary issue or some other issue that can be resolved in another way. But the public hearings are very instructive, and it gives you as a commission a sense of what the public is thinking, what their priorities are, and what issues they want you to take a look at during the course of the almost year that we're going to have on this one. The second meeting that I usually recommend to a commission is meeting with the mayor. In this case, you have a city treasurer with members of the council and other local officials. I usually recommend this meeting after the public hearing because these are the people who work day to day with the charter. And they know where the bodies are buried. They know where the problems are. They know what the impediments have been. They know what works and they know what doesn't work. I also rely on the commissioners and the current officials to recommend if there are past officials that they think might have things to offer, because past officials, with the benefit of hindsight and distance, may have some worthwhile observations as well. These folks will be able to go through the document, go through their history with the document, and take a look at the nits in the document, the annoyances in the document, and may actually have fixes that would be worthy of consideration. Throughout my years doing these things, we have found problems in budget processes where we didn't think they existed, structure of the council, the legislative process, structure of boards and commissions, how they're appointed, different issues within a department, flexibility for the creation of departments, public accessibility and outreach. This year, we've dealt with issues in some of the municipalities. Police issues are obviously a very big issue, as Mel Medina knows. Down in Hamden, we've spent a lot of time on recrafting a police commission structure in Hamden right now. But a lot of that has come out of the public support and out of the elected officials that are also involved in the process. Usually after we meet with the elected officials, the government officials, one of the exercises I like to bring into this, and I will talk to Howard Rifkin or somebody in his office to join me, is we kind of walk through the charter, and particularly the Corporation Counsel's office has a real good sense on a day-to-day basis of what kind of issues they have encountered. I'm sure Alex Aponte, Ken Kennedy, John Gale, a number of members of this commission, Bruce Rubenstein, who have worked with the charter over the course of time, will have insights, but having the people who have to work with the document every day really does provide value. And what we'll do is we'll kind of walk through chapter by chapter, and we will get the perspective of the Corporation Counsel, and I'll try to give you some of my perspective, since this is my fourth time through, on what I consider the issues in each of the chapters, if there are any, of your charter. It's interesting. One of the things that we like to look at is, are there ancient, out of date, or provisions in your charter? The kind of things that should be better off, and are there things that are better off left to ordinance if you can establish a constitutional standard in the charter and move the business of legislating to the council so they can adopt an ordinance in accordance with that standard. Those are the kinds of things you sometimes find as you go through a red line. In one of my towns, we went through a red line provision on a Veterans Commission. And somebody had said to me, we really should move the Veterans Commission out of the charter, make it a mandated commission and put it into the ordinances. And I said, why do you want to do that? You may stir up opposition from the veterans community. And they pointed out that this is in the 1990s, that we still had a requirement for veterans of the Spanish-American War and World War I as required members of the Veterans Commission. And so we attempted to take it out of the charter, but we had enormous objection from veterans, and we had to put language in if they are still alive or something like that. We had to compromise as opposed to take the provision out, but sometimes you come across things like that. So they serve two functions, the red line. One is it points out the absurdity of some provisions and gives the commission, and secondly, gives all of you an opportunity to gain an understanding of the document in its entirety. The red line also allows you to really get a feel for how the government works. Again, another one of my early charters, going through the red line process, acquainted me with the fact that that charter was not organized on a functional basis, but on an alphabetical basis, because the codification company found it easier to track their ordinances and charters alphabetically rather than functionally. Hartford has a functionally based charter. I will point out for the record, it really is laid out very well in that regard. So what we really want to make sure is, as we go through the document, we want to make sure that that the legislative and executive powers are clearly delineated, clearly understood. Are there any problem areas that need to be fixed? We should fix them, because fundamentally, the only two required provisions in any charter are a chief executive and a legislative body. It could take many forms, but those are the only two absolute requirements. Then you want to make sure that you really have a good structure and identity of necessary departments and commissions in charters. The things that you'll have to think about is, do you really want to have all the departments named in the charter, or do you want to have functions named in the charter? Do you want to keep the departments in the charter, or do you want to move them to the ordinances and the budget process so that you can have a more facile government where the charter requires the functions but allows for some flexibility with the government by allowing it to be adopted by ordinance or by budget, through the budget process. And finally, you want to make sure that we look at the budget process. I did a major overhaul this year in one of my towns. Some archaic provisions on the issuance of bonds. I've really not studied your charter for that. Something that might be worth looking at. Condemnation, of course, planning and zoning, and civil service. I believe we dealt with civil service 2 charters ago. So the issue with a charter, which I kind of alluded to, is, do you want to have a micromanaging charter, or do you want to have a constitution? And so it's really important that, again, as the chair indicated, that the charter reflect the needs, the ambitions, and the hopes and aspirations of your community. It's the single most important law in your community, and you want to avoid what I talked about earlier, the culture of disregard or the culture of paralysis. So there's 2 schools of thought. Some favor detailed micromanaging. The Stanford, if you want to take a look at one that is like that, the Stanford charter has a lot of rules and a lot of codification. It tries to anticipate all the contingencies in the operation and management of a government, and and that's an approach that was taken by a lot of the older charters. There are aspects of that in the Hartford Charter, in the New Haven Charter. The second option is a constitutional document, one that broadly establishes the parameters of the government, lays out the processes for how a bill becomes a law, how the budget is adopted, lays out the structure, the philosophy, the division of power, and leaves to the mayor and the council the task of following those admonitions, but filling in the blanks by relying on their ability to adopt ordinances and budgets, rather than leaving it to a charter commission to change something that could be changed more easily if it doesn't really require being in the constitutional document. So again, it's a governing document. It's a tricky assignment, and I've got all these lawyers here, but a lot of even lawyers don't really understand. I know some of you do, and probably all of you do, that unlike state and federal constitutional documents, there are no inherent powers at the local level. People have a hard time with that. I'll give you an example. I'm involved in another city right now. Powers are distilled through the superior constitutional sources from the state constitution, state law, principally Title VII, although there are municipal provisions that are strewn throughout the general statutes. And of course, there are collective bargaining agreements. And don't discount the impact of collective bargaining agreements on local government, because collective bargaining provisions supersede the provisions of your constitution, of your charter, and of your ordinances if they differ. So if you adopt a collective bargaining agreement that modifies a disciplinary process that is laid out in your charter, it is the collective bargaining document that governs in that case. We also, as I indicated, have the special acts. And so the, I talked about that, charter versus ordinances, MIRA, again, that's collective bargaining agreements. So all those things are things that you need to worry about. And so in the end, what you're trying to accomplish essentially is clarity, flexibility, and accountability. The work plan, and this is broad because you're going to adopt your own work plan, but to give you a feel for what the next few months are going to look like. Between now and May 2022, the work is going to be with all of you. It's going to be your work plan. We're having the organizational meeting tonight. We'll decide on when the first statutory public hearing will be. We will then have the working meetings of the commission, public official input, red line. Throughout the year, one of my functions is not only to answer legal questions, but to really kind of help you and facilitate the process as we go through issues to try to put together some really solid panels of experts in the various areas that we will tackle. I don't know what they are. You will tell me what they are as we go through this process, and I will use my relationships with a wide variety of people. As Mel knows, I called on him, and I've called on actually David and the president of the council to join me at seminars and other communities. But they're very useful, and they really do provide a lot of insights. And I usually try to bring in people who have shared experiences from towns and cities that are comparable in size or that have very creative and interesting approaches to issues. We then will, that's the heavy work. Next May, as we get to the end of the process, and this is where I am literally with 2 charters right now, we're getting ready for the second public hearing, and the final reviews come out after the public hearing. We'll be then submitting it a year from May to the city clerk, go to the council agenda. Council will review it for a period of time. They'll have their public hearing. We'll probably have a joint meeting with the council at some point in about a year, where we get a feel for, they'll get a feel for what we're doing, although I would suspect with Councilman Gale on the body, that the council will be getting regular updates. And Mr. Chair, I strongly recommend that you and I during the course of the year will keep the council leadership apprised of what we're doing. And I'll make one comment. Let me just stop here and make that comment. When I first started doing this, I remember not knowing the answer or taking the simple way out, where somebody said, well, of course, we're an independent commission, charter commission, right, Mr. Mednick? And I said, yes, you're an independent commission. But then I thought about it for a second and I realized, yes, but no, you can do anything you want at the Charter Commission. But the bottom line is you're created by the legislative body, and the legislative body is going to act on your proposals before the public has an opportunity to vote on your proposals. It's the legislative body that will ultimately decide. And so that's why I, as a rule, in the early days, tried to segregate my commission from the councils. As I learned more about the process about 20 years ago, I made sure that we integrate with the council. And that doesn't mean that the commission shouldn't tackle issues that they feel are critical and important. But the real objective will ultimately be to either have public support backing your provision so the council will see the light of day, or persuading the council of the merits of your position. But ultimately, they're the body that's going to be approving it. So you should really, really kind of paint with a broad brush, but understand at some point you're going to have to paint within the lines if we want to bring this charter to a conclusion that gets to the voters a year from November. And so if the council approves your charter next June, so if we do all the things I've suggested and we paint within the lines and you bring the plane down and we land safely, then the council will approve it. It'll be over. Your job will be over with your last acts in May. If the council doesn't approve, if they have questions, then you will reconvene after that period of time and have about 30 days to look at the council questions, look at the council issues, and only be able to deal with those items. So if there's 5 items that they're focused on, those are the only items you can address during that 30-day period. You then go back to the council, hopefully with the right answers or the final answers, and then they will vote the final charter out, either accepting your final position or rejecting your final position and accepting elements of it. So they can accept parts of what you propose, or all of what you propose, or none of what you propose. But it will be over sometime at the very latest in August of 2022, because you have to get this to the Secretary of State the first week in September, and then the referendum will be in November. So that's kind of it. The role of counsel is I provide legal advice, do research. I will obviously be relying on a lot of members of the body. I was really impressed with the experience of the lawyers and the non-lawyers on this commission. I think we have having community organizers, neighborhood representatives, and a lot of the lawyers serve those functions as well, is going to be enormously valuable as we look at some of these issues in terms of just keeping our ear to the ground. But I'll be working with you and facilitating the seminars and workshops, and also work with you on the council interface. I'm not going to advertise. I've done a lot of charters around the state, a lot of structural issues throughout the state in the procurement and civil service area, a lot for Hartford, a fair amount of work in Waterbury and Stanford and New Haven as well. Just finishing up Middletown, a big procurement project in where was it? State of Connecticut. I rewrote the procurement laws in the state of Connecticut. I've just finished the year, and I guess we're just about done, being one of the 3 outside lawyers to work with OPM on the pandemic executive orders. So if you don't like the executive orders, I didn't write those ones that you didn't like. I didn't work on the ones you didn't like. I'll point out for the record. I'm a former corp counsel, just like Alexander, Alex Aponte. We share that position. I'm a former president pro tem of the New Haven Board of Alders. I've been counsel to the CCM Board of Directors, represent a bunch of COGs, and have done currently involved in an interesting political dispute between the New Haven Board of Alders and the mayor of New Haven, where I'm in court on the side of the Board of Alders. So I do a lot of municipal work, and I am grateful that the council has brought me back to do this. And I look forward to working with you, Chairman Wolfe, and with your colleagues, and happy to answer any questions and try to be a useful resource for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It's very impressive, and we're really looking forward to working with you. Questions for Steve?
I have a question for you, Steve.
Yes.
You mentioned the types of meetings. You said a statutory public hearing or hearings.
Yeah.
Will the public have a chance to make comments at those statutory hearings? They will.
Yeah, you can adopt rules. Let me just point out for the record, you have 2 statutorily required public hearings. I highly recommend that you have regular interface with the public. I probably should put that into my presentation.
That would be good.
Yeah, it doesn't mean every meeting, but it seems to me that as you're going through a big issue, if you're tackling, let's say you tackle the budget, as we did in one of my towns, or the composition of your council, we're going to go through a bunch of workshops, and you're going to have a website. maybe David could talk about that a little later. There is going to be a website. There's going to be a way for the public to communicate with us. One of the documents that I work on throughout the process is I do a tracking document. So as we go through the public hearings and we go through any public comment ends up in my tracking document, your tracking document, on the tracking document I prepare for you. Periodically, I will give you the tracking document, and that's one of the ways you're going to decide what issues will be priority issues after you get through the public hearing process. So my recommendation is if you're tackling a big issue, after we have a draft for that there's some consensus on, you might want to have an interface with the public at the beginning of the next meeting, not a full-blown public hearing, but an opportunity for the public, if they want to come in and talk. And that'll be up to the chair and to the body to decide how often you want to do that. But you should strongly recommend interface with the public on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Great. Additional questions? We can't all be experts. There's got to be some other questions. Anyone?
I'll ask another question, if I may. I find it fascinating that the United States government has a constitution that does not require any particular review of it. It gets amended from time to time, but there's no 10-year or 20-year or ever. And the state of Connecticut has a constitution similarly where there's no particular review. But here we have a situation where there's a mandatory review of I'll call the Charter of the Constitution of the City of Hartford, if I may. And I'm just wondering if you have what your thoughts and ideas might be as to why that's thought to be important, that municipalities in Connecticut review their charters every 10 years when we don't review the state or the federal government on any regular basis.
That's a great question, Counselor. My thought on it is the following. It's like so many other things at the local level of government. The federal government has the greatest capacity to raise money and distribute funds. The state is then second in line, and we're at the end of the line. And because so much of what we do is based on the express grant of authority from the state of Connecticut, laws change from time to time, and what we're authorized to do may change from time to time. So there are things we can do in our charter now that you couldn't do 10 years ago. And so what I'd like to get to, Counselor, is a place where your charter is more like a constitution. A lot of the charters are so heavily codified, much more heavily codified in some ways than the United States Constitution, where we can shift as much out of the charter into the Code of Ordinances. We did that in Hartford. I think we did that in Hartford with civil service and procurement. We moved big sections of those provisions out of the charter in one of our earlier charter revisions because it made no sense to have those kind of processes in the charter so that you'd have to either convene a special charter commission or do it every 10 years and say, oh, we forgot to do this, let's fix this. So my objective, if I'm around long enough with all the charters I've worked on, is to try to pare them down to a point where they are constitutional documents where you probably don't have to look at them as often as we do.
I have a question related to that, Steve. I found it interesting when you were talking about the differences between, and I think this is along the same lines, a charter that kind of micromanages not just process, but departments and functions versus something that is more constitutional. Is the reading in that you're essentially providing more responsibility and you're getting a more effective might be the wrong word, but you're requiring the legislative and executive branch of the municipal government to do a bit more work in terms of like how it's structuring itself? And is that then creating a stronger executive and legislative branch if you do it that way, or is it not guaranteed?
Well, it depends. It depends. If you empty your charter out and say the executive shall execute and the legislative body shall legislate, then you're giving them really broad basically blank checks. When I let me give you a great example. The Middletown charter that I'm working on right now. Middletown has one of the most pared down charters I've ever worked on. And so on the surface, I looked at it, and if there's anybody from Middletown listening, I think it's wonderful. It's a wonderful charter, but it may be too pared down. And so one of the things that I've done in the Middletown charter is not put in new boards and commissions or new departments, because I like the fact that they don't have many departments or boards or commissions specifically set forth in the charter. What I've tried to do, and what if the charter is adopted, we have a provision, here's how you create a department. So you just can't go off and create it. This is how you create a department. This is the kind of public interface you need to have. This is how you build a board and commission. These are the rules for creating a board and commission. You can have up from 5 to 15. They should be odd, unlike this commission, which is an even numbered commission. You try to have odd numbered commissions, assuming everybody shows up for every meeting. That's another story. So that's what I think you need. You need to have the structure. Commissioner Medina, as you know, because you participated in this, we're working on the police commission. You do not have a police commission in Hartford, but in Hamden they have a police commission, and the police commission actually has disciplinary authority. And we're really trying to make it a modern police commissioner. In that case, we want constitutional standards that will be as strong as they can in that important area of public safety and community safety. And so we focus there. But at the same time, we try to push things to the Board of Police Commissioners to be able to make regulations and policies. And we push things to the legislative body in that town to be able to adopt ordinances and make it clear that they have the ability to adopt ordinances. But at the same time, we are mindful, and I'm actually putting provisions in charters that I never did, because we had a big incident in one of my towns a couple of years ago where we were talking about this discipline of the police. I think Commissioner Medina knows which town it is. And the public kept saying, well, Attorney Mednick, it says you can fire that police officer. I said, yes, it does. But here's the collective bargaining agreement. And the collective bargaining agreement supersedes the charter provision. So I'm now putting in my charters language that not only do we have to abide by law, by regulation, by the charter provisions and the ordinances, we have to abide by agreements, including collective bargaining agreements. I think it needs to be clear what the law of the state is, whether you like it or not. The MIRA has laws that supersede our local charters. If mayors and city councils give things away in a collective bargaining agreement, that will trump your charter. So that's what I meant by that. And you'll see as we go through the process, that philosophy in action.
If I may, can we have a copy of speaking of police and the issues that are currently existing within not just in Hartford, but within the nation as a whole? I'd like to get a copy of our collective bargaining agreement. I think that's going to be important as we go through our charter revision process, so that we can know what's required in that document.
Sure. David,
what we can do.
Yeah, I assume David would be able to, I've got to make David the host. Hold on a second there. How do I do that?
Hover over my profile and then the 3 little buttons at the top right-hand corner.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Somebody just.
If I may.
Yeah, I'll try to answer.
In answer to Councilman Gale's question to you with respect to why the state doesn't do what they've told the cities to do. The last state constitutional convention, there was an ample discussion about various commitments and requirements to impose upon the municipalities. And one of them was to promulgate a statute requiring a 10-year review, which they brought back to the legislature, which then promulgated the statute. And that's why you have a divergence.
In terms of requesting documents and things, I think that the commission might want to look at. what's the appropriate process in your mind, Steve, that we need to go through? For example, I might want to look at what, Hanway's got boards of commissioners, so does New Haven, for their public safety. I'm interested in looking at also in Ithaca, New York's done some interesting things recently. So is Eugene, Oregon.
Yeah.
What do we do? What's the process?
One of the things that I do, and David and I will talk about the protocols. David, are you the other host, David? I want to make sure David is the host.
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. One of the things, and I didn't talk about this, 2 different documents I create as we go through the process. I create background documents, and I have either through CCM or through my my efforts over time have created and accumulated comparative data. So for example, I have a lot of comparative data that's new because I've created it for 2 charters this year that you'll get the benefit of, dealing with police commissions, which you do not have, of course, but dealing with the whole issue and process that's involved there. And I have it on a lot of different council compositions, structures of city councils, if we address that issue. I have a lot of very recent data on budget processes in Connecticut, processes that work, different types of communities, how the big cities all basically share some fundamental similarities, but there are some differences in them as well. So as we go through the process and we begin to prioritize the work, and I think we have to work through the chair, and I haven't actually met the chair and talked to him privately, but I think the chair will have to help establish some protocols so I'm not getting inundated with a series of requests. And I think ultimately the research should be based and focused on the priorities created by the commission. And so I think we would probably run that through the chair, and I would take the advice of the chair and of the meetings. I mean, I'll get instructions from the meetings that will be clear, but I don't think people should be coming directly to me unless it's run through the chair. Just from the economics perspective, I think it makes a great deal of sense to do it that way.
I'll run my research through the chair because I can do some of my research myself. I'll run it through the chair as well.
Well, I got a lot of lawyers who can work as interns for me. I mean, not to insult anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to take any research that you have and forward it on, so we can post it up on the website for everyone to take a look at.
Great.
So Chair, if Steve is going to be posting some things, you referenced 2 commissions that you worked on. You talked about Stamford and you talked about Middletown. And so it would be great if you're going to be posting, or if we can have access, and I know our chair will probably have to make this decision, to towns where you thought that the charter was actually efficient, and that it was pretty much, it wasn't micromanaging. So that would be great to do a comparison regarding that as well.
Yeah, I did not. Stamford is my dream charter project. I have never worked on the Stamford charter. I've been telling Mayor Martin that that's my dream as I approach 70 to get his charter and try to fix it. Okay. But these are all online, so I can give you, we can probably set up the threads to get you into the various charters. But I will, as we're going through this process, do comparative charter analysis.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. And there is no perfect charter in Connecticut, I will tell you. Middletown has the potential, because it's so spare, that they really have the potential to be a model charter.
Okay, other questions? All right, seeing none, we can move on to, thank you, Attorney Mednick.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
We can move on to section 6, selection of a public hearing date. And I did not develop this this agenda, so Steve and David, I may be asking for your input at certain points as we walk through this. Selection of a public hearing date. It's my understanding that we're not required by statute to have a public hearing within a certain amount of time, but we should make sure to schedule it pretty soon. How does the week of May 10th sound? And then if if that week generally works for folks, I'd look to David and Steve to see what days you both are available, if there are conflicts with council or other towns and their charters, et cetera.
I'm okay on May 11th. I have a charter meeting on the 12th and 13th. And I guess May 10th would work for me as well. There's a budget hearing, according to Molly Rosado, on the all those nights. Molly, if she's listening, she just sent me a text.
Yeah, I'll have to confirm because I believe that week is going to be a little tight. But I can let the chair know, and then he can communicate that out, and we could try to find some consensus.
Is that the first or second week of the budget proceedings?
Budget proceedings start, I believe, the first week of May. So the second week is,
okay.
Attorney Mendick, if we kick it out to the week of the 17th, are there any issues with that?
No, there's no legal issues. But I have meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday of that week. My charters are finishing up. May will be the end of those two charters, but I would be able to do it on the 20th of May.
Anyone else have issues with the 20th?
No
the
issue.
20th may work for council as well.
It's
May
open.
20th works. David?
It may, yes.
Okay, why don't we tentatively schedule our meeting for May 20th, and David can send out an email confirming that later on.
What time, May 20th?
What date is
Molly says that's a good date.
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
it? Thursdays are good.
Fine.
What time?
7 p.m.
Now, May 20th is an interesting date, folks. You know what that is?
No.
That may be the day the executive orders end.
That's right.
And so I'm going to try to find out from putting my executive order hat on what's going to happen. There may be a statute that allows for these kinds of meetings to continue, or that may be the last or the first, depending on how the executive order falls. This commission is going to be a commission I actually meet. I have not met my other two commissions this year. So May 20th may be that date. So I just thought I'd point that out for the record that it may be a public meeting.
Attorney Mednick, a question that I have, given that you've done these charter reviews pre-pandemic and in the middle of the pandemic, did holding the public meetings over Zoom during the pandemic increase public interest and engagement versus in person?
I don't know. I don't know if anybody has actually done that data. People have said to me, I represent a lot of a couple of the COGs. So between my two councils of government, I have about 45 communities. And a lot of the members of the COGs in the smaller towns have indicated that they felt like there was more public participation with the meetings. And I have encouraged, and I and the other lawyers met with Freedom of Information last summer because we thought that we needed to work out a hybrid protocol so that you can keep a component of the meeting online. Under law, right now, and with the ruling of the Freedom of Information Commission, even after May 20th, any of you as members of this body can participate remotely under an FOI opinion, so long as we can hear you, you can hear us, you can hear the public, and the public can hear you. It doesn't address the public side of that, but FOI said they thought that it would probably work without changing a letter of the law. But I would not advise clients to do things unless there is some kind of clear indicator from the commission that what we're doing is being done legally. So I don't know the answer definitively, but I know some people feel that it has enhanced public participation. And it's made meetings accessible for people who can't get out at night to go to meetings. So I think that I think these little pictures of us on screens are something that will be here for a while. It'll be interesting to see how it goes when you have the bulk of a meeting in a public room and others participating on the screen. But this has worked pretty well through the pandemic.
That's helpful to the chair. Then I would just ask a consideration of figuring out if we can figure out all the ways we can make these meetings accessible to the public, especially if we think, since we have prior and existing council members, they may have input too on what remote work has or remote access has done for increased engagement. Having worked around the city council in Hartford, I know that meetings tend to be the same 5 people sometimes, and increasing accessibility, I think, is critical for what the task that we have ahead of us.
I agree with you. I think there is some value as to having people meet in person. I mean, I think it'll be up to the chair and the leadership to determine what that function is. But there's also value in this participation. I think, try to maybe have a mixture of both. But at some point, this does make a lot of people participate in organizations sometimes when they wouldn't, because they can simply do it from wherever they are. And then that does increase participation. I found out in the organizations that I'm involved with, you have seen some increase in participation with the organizations, simply because it's convenient.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that as the accessibility piece, definitely. In person is wonderful. I can't wait to see people face to face. And this really has broadened the amount of human beings who can take part in this, and the types of human beings who, for all of the accessibility reasons, can't make it to Main Street. So if we can figure out a way to keep this Zoom thing going for this, if we can do this, and then even if we all could figure out how to share this on other social media platforms as we do this, this is beautiful community engagement.
Yeah, I agree with you all and look forward to working on a process for that. And I think, because we have a pretty significant amount of time before that first public hearing, it would really, welcome ideas about how to market this first public hearing and what the best way to do that is. I think we all have different groups that we're coming into contact in different networks. And so any ideas I think are welcome and be great to, have the most public engagement at this public hearing that we can get. All right. On to section B, a meeting with current and past Hartford officials. I think we kind of already covered this.
Yeah.
Our second meeting will be with current officials, and then thereafter we can discuss having some past officials in as needed. Selection of a meeting night. We have our first meeting on a Thursday. Do Thursdays work for meeting nights going forward after that? I'm seeing a lot of
works for me.
Nodding. Okay, great.
Yes, Thursday nights are good.
I would propose, and Steve, in Hampton and Middletown, you guys meet bi-weekly, is that right?
We have a meeting every other week. I think that that makes a great deal of sense, especially since we're losing almost 3 weeks to start. I would recommend that you start with that every other week. Makes a lot of sense.
Okay, great.
And then the rest of it, Mr. Chairman, will depend on what you tackle, how much we're tackling. You may have to have special meetings. I've had 2 Saturdays in a row with the Hamden Charter Commission, just to try to finish up, because they realize we're running out of time and we have to get some things done. So I think if you meet every other week, I think you'll get a sense of the meter that you need to follow and how many meetings you ultimately need to have.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we do the first and third Thursdays of the month as the second and fourth Thursdays. There are caucus meetings in preparation for the upcoming council meetings.
Good.
Any objections to that?
None at all.
Okay, David, would you put together a proposed regular meeting schedule based on that?
Yes.
And maybe you could post them so that they're regular meetings. So we can amend the agendas anytime we want with the regular meetings if they're posted in advance.
Before you go on, I have a question for the chair or either Steve. You mentioned that the second meeting will be with current and past Hartford officials. Who will determine who those past Hartford officials will be?
Well, that's really up to you. I would leave it up to the body, and you should be thinking about this and talking to the chair and the leadership. You've got 3 officers now. I'll be relying on them. I don't try to impose people I know in Hartford. I have ideas, and I know a number of people in Hartford, but I would leave it up to you to decide who you think might be useful in that regard. We know who the incumbents are, but I think that with regard to anybody in the past, you'll know best who those people are and be able to make judgments, if any. There may not be anybody you want to hear from at this point, without insulting anyone. It may not be necessary, but I think where they are here, you might as well take advantage of their presence. But that'll be for you to decide.
If I may, I think you've got a sufficient number of former council people here, but you've got.
Yep.
I've always thought a great resource might be Treasurer Napier, also Treasurer Cloud. Because some people have thought about the city finances. I'd like to talk to some of the past people who did the charter revisions. This charter revision in my mind is pretty much your document along with Alan Taylor. And what Alan's thoughts were, particularly if we're making suggestions, how does that flow with the original thought process from Alan? Since I think it's hard to consider him the father of the current charter, but Alan had some definite viewpoints when we made the change from council manager to strong mayor form of government, and some constituents' issues about the balance of power.
No, absolutely. Alan, I recently had Alan talk about that very issue in one of my charter revisions. I had somebody talk about a town that went to manager form of government. Alan went the other way from a manager form to a strong. And he forgot a lot of stuff, but he started remembering it. So he'd be very good to talk to.
Oh, great resource if you can find the time, but I leave that up to leadership. But just the suggestions about where we go if we look at Board of Ed, maybe some of the past members of the state board. Remember, Hartford had that takeover, and why did we do that? And what their ideas were, and maybe that could guide us going forward as well. Just some thoughts.
I guess my question is, and this is for the chair, do you want us to send recommendations via email, or how do you want us to send recommendations as far as those past officials?
Please do, yeah. Email me and CC David Grant, and he'll, Steve, they'll keep us all organized, and we'll all be apprised of what's going on, and we'll keep the lines of communication open. And to the point about past charter revision commissions, David, I believe the clerk's office has, and Steve, you may have them too, records of the work that the previous commissions have done. So if we can get those posted to the website as well, that would be great for us all to take a look at. So we have the folks that don't have institutional knowledge here can bring themselves up to speed and see what was done.
I'll talk to David about the logistics of making that work.
Great. On to section F, attendance requirements. Hopefully, I don't think there are any attendance requirements, but I would hope that everyone, you've all been appointed, and I hope that everyone participates to the full extent you can.
Mr. Chair, question.
Sure.
If there was a particular meeting I was unable to attend, I have a council aide that I would like to be able to send in my stead, not to participate with comments, but to participate in terms of listening and to report back to me. Is there any problem with doing that type of thing?
I don't see any issues.
Remember,
if they're not voting or anything like that, I think they're not a proxy, but they're simply your representative at the table. I think that would be a meritorious idea. Thoughtful.
Thank you.
With respect to attendance, I'm hoping, depending when we start that in-person meeting, that we still leave this option available. So that, I'm particularly concerned as we go into the summer months, and given COVID, I think a lot of people will be coming in and out of the state when they're vaccinated. if we can make sure we've got this option available, that probably helps with attendance.
I agree.
Okay, noted.
Is there a requirement for us to meet face to face? Do we have to hold meetings face to face, or could we choose to keep them here?
It depends. It depends on what the General Assembly does. There's a bill before the General Assembly. Once the executive orders go away, 7B, which is the executive order that authorizes this type of meeting, will be gone. As I said earlier, there is, you will be able to participate, Commissioner, from the room you're in right now, if you'd like to, at every meeting, under a ruling of the Freedom of Information Commission, so long as we have the ability to see you, hear you, not see you, hear you, you have the ability to hear us, you have the ability to hear the public, and the public has the ability to hear you. There is an FOI advisory opinion that allows for that. As somebody said to me, and I'm willing to argue it a little differently, somebody in the governor's office said to me that they think that was premised on the fact that the rest of the meeting is in public and that the public is in the room. And that's probably true, because the decision was not made about this type of technology. It was made about a speakerphone that was sitting on a table in a room. And that was the basis for, that was the early technology that allowed for these types of meetings. But I can't give you a definitive answer on the other side of it, because it's just not clear. I think there will be a statute. I'm going to be checking on that, probably not tomorrow, but early next week, to figure out where that statute is. And hopefully, I know a lot of municipalities are going to try to get to the governor and the legislative leadership to allow the governor to keep this protocol at least through the end of the fiscal year, because cities and towns are still in their budget process. And why should they have to worry about switching the protocol from this protocol to a live protocol at this stage? But I don't know where that's going to go. But the answer is you could participate remotely. But I think once May 20th comes, we will probably have to have some part of a meeting in a public place.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about those issues?
Related to attendance, what is the official number for quorum for this commission?
I have one, but Robert's rules is 50% plus one, but we don't have rules. Mr. Chairman, I've never adopted rules for a charter commission. With all the lawyers here, you may want to, but I don't want to waste a week or two or a month or two arguing about them. They've always been relatively informal. I appreciate Councilor Gale's formality, and I think we should follow the formalities with motions and things like that. But I've never had rules, but I think the normal quorum rules, we rely on Robert's rules if we have a quorum issue.
Okay. Important contacts. Item G. I think everyone has Attorney Mednick's email address. They have my email address, David Grant's. If you don't have my cell phone number, I'll send that around. And I think that should be it for our purposes.
Was a list sent out in an email?
I don't think we have a list of everybody's numbers. I don't think we need addresses as long as we have emails. I think that's important, and maybe phone numbers.
Emails and phone numbers.
There was a list that came in through email.
Yeah, I actually sent out a commission profile form. That form on the top section has everyone's first name, last name, email address, phone number. For those of you that didn't have a phone number listed on your resume, I couldn't include that. And then that will also capture any type of attendance and meetings that we have.
And the last item is engaging with the public. So previously the notion of having public comments at meetings was broached. I think that having a portion where the public can weigh in will be helpful. When there is draft language that is being considered. Any other, David and Steve, I think you may have put this item on the agenda. So any other issues that you saw coming up under this item?
Not issues per se, but there's 2 points that I wanted to make. And then Attorney Mednick, if you wanted to jump in and, you know, kind of offer some insight as well. So the first is meetinginfo.org is a platform that's used by the city for various boards and commissions. It's available and open to the public. You do have to register to create an account. So I would encourage everyone on the commission to register. And then you'll simply look at City of Hartford, find our commission, and then you follow it. If you follow our commission, you'll receive notifications every time something is uploaded. All documents will be available on meetinginfo.org. That includes agendas, minutes, supplemental information. So everything will be there. And I would encourage everyone to communicate with the public to let them know that they can use meetinginfo.org to access the progress on the commission to get more informed. The second thing is moving forward, I will go ahead and instead of having a general Zoom meeting, we will most likely be converting our meetings to Zoom webinars so that the public can participate in a digital or a virtual audience. And then if there are any questions, they have an opportunity to engage with commissioners in real time. And so the caveat to the webinar feature, as for some of you who may not know, is that you will all be listed as panelists. That means that a specific email will go out and that link will be unique to you. So please don't share that. There will be a general link for the public, and that you can definitely share so that folks, you know, that want to attend, they can be in the audience under that general link. And then I will also do my best to make sure that that information is posted on meetinginfo.org on a regular basis, and that if we have major votes coming up, that I can communicate that through our distribution lists.
Great. Anything else on engaging with the public? All right, we'll move
Yes.
on. Oh, Bruce.
I was a member of the last Charter Revision Commission, and when we were live, we had meetings not only at the City Hall, but in all sections of the city. And what I would encourage this commission to do is to, when we do live, as Steve said, sometime after May 20th, to, if we're going to have live meetings, that we have it in all sections of the city so that we can encourage the public to be there.
That's a great idea.
Sounds like a great strategy.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. Anything else? All right, we can move on to item number 7, general questions. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, but if there are any other general questions folks have left, now would be the time. All right, seeing none, without objection, we will stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great night.
Nice meeting everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.